Alright, so we're going to multiply these rational expressions, and in order to do that, the first thing we need to do is factor each level. So we'll do that here on some scrap paper. We're going to do the top one. It is 6r squared minus 31r plus 5. We're going to use our AC method, which means we're going to multiply the first digit and the last one. And this happens to be positive 6, and this one's positive 5. So it's positive 6 times positive 5 gives us a positive 30. So now we're going to list all the things that make 30, all the factors of 30, but we're going to do them in a specific way. We're going to put the small ones on the left, small here on the left, and large ones on the right every time we write a set of factors. Like 1 times 30. Well, 1 and 30. 1 is the small number, 30 is the large number. 2 and 15. So 2 and 15. 2 is small, 15 is large. 3 and 10. 4 doesn't work. 5 and 6. So that's the end of that. So we found the things that multiply to make 30. Now, these multiply to make a positive 30, but they could both be positive or they could both be negative to make a positive 30. So we need to go to the problem and we need to figure out which it is. So here, the middle term always goes on the largest factor in each set. So in the set of 1 and 30, 30 is larger. So since the middle term is negative, my 30 is going to be negative. And the large one in each set gets the negative because that's what the sign of the middle term is. Since we now know that the large ones are negative, and we said, hey, you know, these have to multiply to make positive 30. Well, right now they don't because this is showing a positive 1 and a negative 30. That gives you a negative 30. So we want them to multiply to make positive 30, which means these must be negative also for that to happen. 2 negatives multiplied make a positive. So now that we have put all the signs on correctly, we're looking for the set that when you add them together, they equal the middle term. And that's this set right here. Now, we can't just plug those in to this right here like we do with sum factoring sometimes. And the reason that we can't is because this does not start with a 1 on that very first term. So the only option we have is to factor by grouping. So what we're going to do is take these numbers and replace this middle term. So 6r squared minus 1r minus 30r plus 5. All right, now factor by grouping, you just look at 2 terms at a time. These two, we can pull an r out of them that's common. And when you factor out that r, you remove the r, what you have left is 6r minus 1. And you should be able to kind of eyeball it. R times 6r gets back up here to this. If we use the distributive property, would it take you back up there? And then on this half, we want this set to be there. So sometimes it's easier just to write the set here and say, I know it's supposed to be 6r minus 1 because the parentheses have to match. So what number should go here if I'm going to use the distributive property and say something times 6r gives me negative 30r? That can sometimes help you know what sign to put on here. Negative 5 times 6 gives you negative 30. Negative 5 times negative 1 gives you positive 5. All right, so what's in the parentheses is one of our sets that we're going to need for the factoring, and then what's not in the parentheses makes up the other set. So now we know that this top part factors in as 6r minus 1 and r minus 5 on top. Let's do the bottom now. Let's factor that. Getting my paper ready here. Okay. So for the bottom, we have 6r squared plus 35r minus 6. So we're going to multiply the first and last. And we're going to list the factors of negative 36 because it was a negative 6 times a positive 6. So the factors of 36, don't worry about the negative yet. 1 and 36, 2 and 18, 3 and 12, 4 and 9, 5, 6 and 6. There's all of the factors of 36. We go to the sign of the middle term, it says plus, which means all of my large ones are positive then. Again, the large ones are my list on the right. Now these each have to multiply, each set has to multiply to make negative 36. So if my large ones are positive, that means my small ones have to be negative, because a negative times a positive equals a negative. Now that we have the signs on there, we're looking for what made a positive 35. And right here it is, 36 and negative 1, or 36 minus 1 is 35. Again, this didn't start with a 1, it started with something else, so we have to do this whole factor by grouping thing. We rewrite it. 6r squared, we put these two terms in there, minus 1r plus 36r minus 6. And then we just cut it in half so that we're only looking at two terms at a time. And so these two, what they have in common is a r, so we pull that common thing out. And then what you have left is 6r minus 1. We want these parentheses to say the same thing, 6r minus 1. So what's right here would get me multiplied up to here. This is a positive 36, so positive 6 times 6 is 36. And then positive 6 times negative 1 is negative 6. So now we have it. We have r plus 6 and 6r minus 1 as the factors there. So we'll come down here. We have r plus 6 and 6r minus 1. And then we need to factor this one up here as well. We have 5r squared plus 29r minus 6. So we're going to multiply the first and last. 5 times negative 6 is negative 30. List the factors of 30 the way that we've been talking about. All right, and then decide the signs for these sets. Well, since the middle term is positive, the large ones all have to be positive. But they had to multiply to make negative 30. So that means the small ones have to be negative. So once we've figured that out, now we can look for what set makes 29. And right here it is, positive 30 and negative 1. Again, this didn't start with a 1r squared, so we've got to do factor by grouping. So we're going to rewrite this, replacing this middle term with these two terms. And then when we factor by grouping, we pull out what they have in common, and in the parentheses we write what you have left over once you pull that out. So here we have a positive 6 in common. So we have our set 5r minus 1 and r plus 6. So we'll come up here to our problem, 5r minus 1 and r plus 6. And then we'll do this one right here. Factor this one, 30r squared minus 11r plus 1. Multiply the first and last. It's positive 1 times positive 30, so we have a positive 30. List the factors of 30. The sign of the middle term goes on the largest one in each set, but these had to multiply to make positive 30. So they both have to be negative then. So what makes 11, negative 11, is right here, negative 5 and negative 6. and then cut it in half and do your factor by grouping. So there's a 5r in common here. And here there's a -1, because if there's a negative here, you got to pull a negative out. And these didn't really have anything else in common other than everything could be divided by 1, so we know it's a -1 then. If you multiply up through here, it's 6r minus 1, because -1 times -1 is +1. So we have 6r minus 1, 5r minus 1. So we'll do that here. 6r minus 1, 5r minus 1. All right, now that everything's factored, we can look at eliminating anything that they have in common on top and bottom, not side to side, but top and bottom. So I have a 6r minus 1 here and 1 on the bottom. I have a 5r minus 1 on both the top and the bottom here. I have an r plus 6 here and here. And so what we have left here is r minus 5 over 6r minus 1.